stay standing. The colors are going to come behind us here in a second. Okay.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Breckenridge High School. We thank you all for coming. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started today. We'd like you to silence your cell phones and stay off them throughout the duration of this time here. I'd like to represent Breckenridge culture as we know we can, as Mr. Pearson has taught us to. And then please stand when asked throughout the program. We're going to ask you to stand probably multiple times. Respect the flag, and thank you all for coming.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Christy Sullivan, and I'm honored to serve as the superintendent of Breckenridge Public Schools. Thank you for gathering here today in order to honor our nation's and our community's veterans. I'd like to start today's program by thanking all among us who, despite the risk and sacrifice, raised their hands to serve and defend this beautiful nation. Our veterans, active duty service members, guardsmen and women, and reservists. Your service has helped keep our country and its citizens safe and free. Veterans know what it means to proudly serve our nation. And many also know the heartache of holidays spent thousands of miles away from their families. They know the pomp and circumstance of our armed forces. And many also know the tragedy of a fallen soldier. This program is but one way that we honor you, our veterans, as well as all who served before you today. We hope you enjoy the program we've prepared for you, and we thank you for joining us today. Please stand and place your right hand on your heart as our nation's colors are presented.
Now would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
United States Army. United States Marines. The United States Navy. The United States Coast Guard. The United States Air Force. And now for an invocation by Pastor Tim Collins of Inspiration Lutheran Church.
join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this Breckenridge High School who welcomes us in willingly year after year to remember the freedom that we have been afforded. Only because of the bravery of those men and women who have served our great country. On this day, we thank our military men and women for their courageous service and sacrifice for our country and our people. Let us every day express our gratefulness in honor of those soldiers, both past and present. Lord, show us ways in our communities, in our churches, and in our families to express our appreciation, both old and new ways. Keep and protect these heroes, their families today and forever, as they sacrificially protect us. In the powerful name of our Lord Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you, Pastor Tim. And now for a few remarks from Breckenridge's Mayor, Russell Wilson.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see such a great turnout this afternoon after a stormy yesterday. Today is the day we pay tribute to all who have served in the United States Armed Forces. Today is different from Memorial Day in that we honor the living instead of those. Today is different from Memorial Day in that we honor the living instead of those brave men and women who gave the sacrifice of their lives, particularly in battle or wounds suffered during battle in service to our country. Today we honor and thank all the men and women who have served our country, whether in war or peace, for their sacrifice. Today started out as Armistice Day, first commemorated in 1919 by President Woodrow Wilson. It was then recognized by Congress as a day of prayer and thanksgiving in 1926 and passed into law as a national holiday in 1938. Because of World War II and the Korean conflict, Congress changed today's name to Veterans Day in 1954 to honor all American veterans of all wars, and President Eisenhower called upon all Americans everywhere to rededicate themselves to peace. Canada and Australia have Remembrance Day on November 11th, which is more similar to our Memorial Day, and Great Britain also has a Remembrance Day on the Sunday closest to November 11th. We are not alone in recognizing our veterans. Today is not just a day off from work or an excuse to go shopping or a vacation day, but a day to reflect on what our soldiers have given us in terms of freedom and privilege. A day to pay tribute for all we can do in the safety of our country. Today we honor and say thank you to those still among us who have worn the uniforms of the United States Armed Forces. We appreciate the sacrifices you have made and continue to make for our country. Many in attendance today are veterans, and this is your day. I'd like to close the day with a quote from President Ronald Reagan. I saw this inscribed on a monument at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. I quote, "Some people live an entire lifetime and wonder if they have ever made a difference in the world. A veteran doesn't have that problem." Thank you.
It is my great privilege to welcome Command Sergeant Major Bradley Olson, or Brad as I know him. I've known Brad my entire life. In fact, we probably met here in Breckenridge at St. Francis Hospital when I was born. Brad is my uncle. He's a veteran and he's a hero. He dedicated 30 years of his life in full-time enlisted service to the Minnesota Army National Guard. He's served multiple deployments, including Desert Storm, Campaign Start Iraqi Surge, Iraqi Sovereignty, and Operation New Dawn. In fact, one of my early memories of Brad is going to Fergus Falls to say goodbye to Brad as he and a bus full of other soldiers were waved off to Desert Storm deployment. And as I looked up at him as a little girl, my tall, uniformed uncle I thought he is larger than life. And as I welcome him now as speaker to our program today, he still is. Brad earned several decorations and awards in his service, among them including Distinguished Service Medal and a Bronze Star for heroic or meritorious achievement in service in a combat zone. He retired as Command Sergeant Major of the Minnesota Recruiting and Retention Battalion and served previously as a G1 Sergeant Major, 34th Division Headquarters and Headquarters Battalion, a senior guidance counselor at the Minneapolis Military Entrance Processing Station, and an infantryman. After his retirement, he also served as the Human Resources Manning Branch Chief for the Minnesota National Guard in St. Paul. Please join me in giving a warm Breckenridge welcome to Command Sergeant Major Bradley Olson.
Okay, that introduction is going to be the best part of what you get here from me today. I wrote 5 different speeches this week, none of which I brought with me today. Public speaking is supposedly like the most scary thing anybody can do. I can tell you that I am super nervous right now. I grew up in Pelican Rapids, not very far away, small town like this, but man, to get up in public and speak just sucks. So bear with me. I'm not going to be reading off this speech today. I'm going to riff it. Thanks, Christy. I pondered all week, what is a veteran, right? I'm up here and I'm supposed to honor all the veterans that are here, and yet I'm one of those, so it's kind of, I'm in a hard spot here. I don't want to throw honor on myself, but I can tell you, as Christy said, I was the senior MEPS guidance counselor at the Minneapolis Military Entrance Processing Station, and what that meant was that every single soldier that enlisted into the Minnesota Army National Guard, Wisconsin Army National Guard, Iowa, or South Dakota that came through Minneapolis came across my desk. So I actually have my name on the contracts of 3,167 young soldiers that went on to become everything. No generals, but I do have some full colonels. I've got some sergeant majors, people that I signed into the National Guard, something I'm very proud of. But what I want to tell you about is who these people are. And how many of the kids out in the audience have parents that were veterans, moms or dads? Stand up if you would. Moms or dads that were in the military, aunts and uncles that were in the military. Cousins, anybody that you know. Is there anybody in here that doesn't know anybody in the military? There are a few. Okay, that's good. Thank you. I'm glad that many people do. I came to a real shock a few years ago when I got out of the military and I became a civilian, and I realized that in the civilian world there's a lot of people that don't know people in the military. And I had been in nothing but the military, so I thought everybody knows somebody that's in the Army or the Air Force, the Navy, or Marines, whatever, and they don't. But there's people out there in your walks of life, from every walk of life. It was the coolest thing about being a guidance counselor at MEPS was who the people were that came across. There's some PhD holders that became enlisted guys, master's programs, bachelor's program, really well-educated people that came in to be enlisted soldiers. There was also guys that graduated high school, maybe didn't even graduate high school, got a GED, but they were fantastic mechanics or they're fantastic cooks, but they came from all walks of life. There's poor people, there's rich people, there's people from the inner city, there's people from the most rural parts of the country, and that, I think every veteran in here would find in their own history that that's one of the coolest things about your service in the military, is that you get to pair up with other people that are not like yourself, and you always, always, always become a team with the people that you're with. If I could have all the Army guys that are in here stand up. People that have served in the Army? All right. There's 1.35 million people currently serving in the Army. And the Navy? Navy people stand up? 400,000 people currently serving in the Navy. Air Force? 500,000, 500,000 between the active and reserve component. Is there any Coast Guard in here? Thank you. Any Coast Guards? Usually isn't. How about, I'm still waiting for somebody to come up, Space Force. It is a real thing. There's 8,000 Space Force people out there. Someday, maybe if I'm doing one of these again, somebody from the Space Force will stand up. There's a young man named Trent Lucas from the Iron Range area. In World War II, he was on Iwo Jima, and 2 grenades flew into a trench that he was in with 3 other Marines. He threw himself onto those 2 grenades. Only one of them went off. And what Trent said was, "I'm not a Superman." I realized that when I threw myself on the grenade. But I did what was right, just because I was there, and that's what I was supposed to do. Nobody joins the military to be a hero. You think that you are? You think, that's what I'm going to be? I'm going to be a hero? In fact, it's circumstances that make you a hero. It's being in the right place at the right time. It's reacting in the right way. It's implementing your training. But more than anything, it's about the person that's right next to you. Those are the people that get you through the worst things in life. And those are the people that are there afterwards. So to all you veterans out there that I can't say it enough, I know what you went through. I know what others have gone through. And our country should be extremely proud and extremely thankful for every one of you. That was my ad lib. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending this afternoon. I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Mrs. Brandt, and I'm the new 11th and 12th grade social studies teacher here at Breckenridge High School. Being in this position, when I came into the school this fall, I was told of an exciting opportunity to help put together a Veterans Day program that is a highly looked forward to event throughout this community. As part of this program, the incoming senior class presents projects they completed towards the end of their junior year, known as the Vietnam Veterans Project. And this is a very large project, as I've seen as I've been flipping through the cabinets of all of these wonderful binders and folders and portfolios put together. Now, I was tasked with having to choose 3 outstanding projects from the junior class, now seniors, to present their research and findings to talk about what a veteran means to them, to you, the public. And today I'm honored to introduce Dallin Ernst, Grace Miranowski, and Ivy Oshak to share with you what they found when they put together their Vietnam Veterans projects and explain to you the importance of veterans and Veterans Day to them. First, let's give a warm welcome to Dallin Ernst.
Hello. As stated before, my name is Dallin Ernst. Throughout the Vietnam War project, we studied numerous videos, news stories, articles, and papers, but the veteran interview was the most valuable and eye-opening part of the whole project. I interviewed Jim Martin. Jim was an amazing person to talk with. We were unfortunately not able to do the interview in person, so we settled for over the phone. The phone call of 10 questions ended up lasting over an hour. One of the fastest hours of my life, filled with stories. He was only 18 years of age when he was drafted, fresh out of high school. He did his basic in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and once completed, headed straight for Vietnam. He knew nothing about the war. His first impression of Vietnam was how hot and humid it was. And to this day, he cannot get the horrible smell out of his head. He described the smell as dead fish rotting on a stick for days, and then proceeded to chuckle as he stated that they would literally hang fish all over the place in the streets. He was not on the front lines, but played an important role. He started as a forklift operator, loading and unloading the ships that would come into the bay, and he had to do that pretty timely, as the tide would only allow for a certain amount of hours in the day. Then he moved over to the payloader shortly after, and then finally, he was a truck driver. He thanked his background on the farm for providing him with the skills needed to do these jobs that others were less fortunate could not perform. He told me a story of how his commander told him and his buddy to never stop for anything once they started to drive their trucks out of the base. Well, they didn't listen. It was the middle of the night, and the two of them were hauling cargo to a different location a few miles away when the brakes locked up. So they stopped underneath a lone light on top of a bridge to check on them, and within seconds, they were being shot at. Jim stated that he ran to the trucks, slammed on the gas, and never stopped for anything else after that. That was as close to combat as Jim ever got. Jim was one of the lucky ones, he said. He decided to stay an extra month in Vietnam in order to never come back to this horrible place. He said it was the longest month of his life, knowing that he could be home, but he chose to stay, never come back. When he arrived home, he had no welcome party and felt as though he was just gone for the day at Jamestown. Nobody really celebrated him or cared that what he did. And he just felt like that was normal. Nothing had changed, and he just did what he did, got home, and tried to survive. With that being said, I'd like to personally thank all the veterans here today and around the world for their service and future service to protect this wonderful country. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grace Miranowski, and I am a senior here at Breckenridge High School. Last year, while in my class, while I was taking U.S. history with Mr. Sumption, we were assigned a project called the Vietnam Project. For years, I had heard about this assignment from an older cousin of mine, but never truly understood how impactful it would be. Throughout the assignment, we were assigned 4 tasks. Task 1 was to simply write a paper to show what you know of the war before you start the project. Task 2 consisted of watching documentaries. Task 3 was the biggest part of the project, and this consisted of interviewing 4 adults, 4 students, and a Vietnam veteran. And Task 4 consisted of writing a final paper to wrap up everything we had learned. The Vietnam veteran I chose to interview was my grandfather, Merle Marinowski. My grandfather was drafted on May 26, 1971. He went to Lewis, Washington for basic training. He then received many honors, such as Jump Master and E-File Sergeant, and lots more. He was in the service for 2 years and was ordered to Vietnam 3 times. Another highlight of my grandfather's time in service was being a part of the 82nd Airborne. The 82nd was known for always being combat ready. One of my biggest takeaways from the Vietnam Project was seeing how much it not only impacted the veterans' lives, but their families as well. I also learned how hard this war really was on our country and how it is still impacting our people today. Not many of our students knew what this war was, which is why I was grateful to have the opportunity to be more educated and speak on it today. Thank you for having me here today. Happy Veterans Day, and thank you to all that have served for our country.
Hello everyone, my name is Ivy Oshak. As you all know by now, last year in Mr. Sumption's class, us students had to interview a veteran about the Vietnam War. I didn't have a Vietnam veteran, so I interviewed my papa. His name is Daniel Gonzarowski. He joined the Army in 1951 to serve in the Korean War at 18 years old. He spent the January of 1951 to January of 1954 in Germany. When I asked him what his role was, he said it was to be ready in Germany in case the Soviets decided to invade there. He also basically just said he did what he was told. When I asked him about what the scariest part of it all was, he said it was the ship ride over there, because he doesn't do well with water. When I asked my papa about the Vietnam War, he said the biggest thing that upset him is how the veterans were treated when they came back. Many people disagreed with why we were in Vietnam, and people thought the veterans were to blame. He said that when they came home, they were looked at like it was their fault, when really they were just doing what they were told to do. My papa was already out of the service by the time Vietnam had begun, but as an Army vet, this really bothered him because it wasn't their fault. Our soldiers and veterans are our nation's heroes. They made the ultimate sacrifice to each other, their families, and their country. So today, on Veterans Day, I want to thank everyone who has served and honor the fallen men and women. From the bottom of my heart, thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Dallin, Grace, and Ivy. As you can tell, this is a significant project that I'm excited to carry through to the current junior class as they enter the senior classroom next fall again. Now it's my honor to present the Quilts of Valor presentation from the Red River Quilters Club.
Good afternoon and welcome. It is wonderful to see you all here today. My name is Cindy Kavidra, and today joining me I have my sister Lori Luff and friend Sarah Belmore. We are volunteers with the Red River Quilters here in the local area. Together we represent over 10,000 Quilts of Valor members and volunteers around the nation. That's 100,000, excuse me. In 2003, while her son was deployed to Iraq, a quilter named Catherine Roberts started the movement that became Quilts of Valor. Since that time, over 300,000 Quilts of Valor have been awarded. Our group alone has awarded nearly 250 quilts since we started in 2018. Our mission is to cover all service members and veterans touched by war with comforting and healing Quilts of Valor. A quilt of valor is a handmade quilt that is made up of 3 layers. The top layer represents the community and individuals brought together to piece it. The middle layer represents warmth, comfort, peace, and healing. The backing represents strength and supports all the layers. Quilts of Valor must also have a label with the names of the volunteers who used their talents to make the quilt, the name of the recipient, and the date awarded. The quilt says unequivocally, "Thank you for your service, sacrifice, and valor in serving our nation." Military service is a badge of honor for so many Americans. It is a commitment and a sacrifice that many men and women have made throughout the years since our country was founded. Their value is acknowledged and appreciated by those of us that rely on their service for our freedoms. The Red River Quilts of Valor chapter recognizes veterans like Russell, Dell, and Bradley by awarding them a quilt that represents the patriotism they embody. Although we can never know your sacrifices while keeping us safe, this quilt is an expression of gratitude meant to thank and comfort you. Okay, excuse me. Let's start with our veterans, so if you want to come up, please. Okay, first we have Russell Graves. Russell was a young farm boy from Iowa who was just 18 when he joined the Marine Corps. After basic training in San Diego, he reported to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for plumbing and water supply training. In September of 1964, while in Okinawa, the 9th Engineer Company boarded the ship Alamo for training in the Philippines when they were called to Vietnam. They floated off the Vietnam shore for 128 days, waiting for the command to land. Upon landing, his job would be to set up a water point to purify water, mainly for drinking, cooking, and bathing. The command to land didn't come for him. Thank you, Russ, for your service. Next, we have Del Wurtsema. Del served with the 173rd Airborne Brigade as a combat medic in Vietnam. He went on patrols with his unit to care for wounded soldiers. He also worked in the aid station at the LZ Uplift. Del received numerous medals and badges for his service, but he is most proud of his combat medical badge. A special memory of his is the letters he received from his mom every day. Thank you, Del, for your service. Next, we have Brad. We have heard about his service, so today we would just like to award him a quilt and thank him for doing that. Thank you so much, Brad, for your service. On behalf of the Red River Quilters and the Quilts of Valor Foundation, it was our great pleasure to honor and thank these men today with a Quilt of Valor and to recognize their service and the sacrifices they and their families have made to endure freedoms for all of us by their service in the United States Marines and Army. This concludes the Quilt of Valor award ceremony, but we have something new for us this year. The Quilts of Valor Foundation has partnered with a Vietnam War commemoration program. The program was created through the 2008 National Defense Authorization Act to honor all those who served during the Vietnam War. So, the presentation of a Vietnam veteran lapel pin will be made as authorized by the United States Vietnam War commemoration of the National Defense Authorization Act. The pin that you'll be receiving has the message, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you." That is embossed on the back of the pin, which will be worn closest to the heart of the wearer. On behalf of a grateful nation, we thank you for your service.
Thank you so much to the Red River Quilters Club. Your tangible gifts honor the sacrifice, dedication, and service of the wonderful men present with us today. Now, please join me in an intentional moment of silence to honor all those veterans, followed by taps played by Breckenridge High School senior Colby Differding. Would everyone please stand?
Thank you. You may be seated. On behalf of the entire school district and our community, I want to thank you all for your efforts for today's program. Kids, students, your music was beautiful. You sounded wonderful. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank Courtney Diesler and our Veterans Day Committee for arranging for today's program. Also, Steve Bakken and Chad Affield, among many others, who helped to set up for today's event. Thank you to all who participated today for your generous service for our community. It truly is touching. And I'll tell you, when you hear taps and you see tears out in the audience, it's very hard to get up and speak after that. A couple housekeeping items as we dismiss today. In a moment when our program concludes, we will all once again stand as our colors are retired, which means as our honor guard takes our flags out of the gym. We'll remain standing with our hands on our hearts once again until the colors have exited the gym. Once the band begins playing, senior high students, actually grades 7 through 12, you will be dismissed first to go back to your 7th hour classes, Followed by elementary students, you will gather with your teachers, and on your teacher's direction, we'll walk back over to the elementary school together. To our servicemen and women, our veterans, our community members who have joined us today, thank you for coming and for participating in today's ceremony. We will have a brief reception back in the corner near our concession stand, so we hope you're able to join us. To our veterans, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for raising your hands and answering the call of duty. And thank you for our freedom.